little over a week ago, and you have sent me quite a bit of information, and some of it I knew, and there's some of it I didn't. So really looking forward to tonight. And you're a little low all of a sudden. Now, we had just done a test, folks, before the show. Oh,
okay, how's that sound?
there you are. Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Well, welcome. And why don't we start with a little background? And what got you interested in Planet X? What got you even thinking there might be some truth to all this?
Oh, God. How long is this show tonight?
Well, we've got about a little over 2.5 hours, and I'm going to try to limit the breaks tonight so we can get as much information as we can.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in San Francisco, California. Went through the regular school system, GED from high school. Met my wife. My wife right there. We were married right after high school. We have 3 kids and 2 grandkids. I went to San Mateo College for police officer reserve training. I wanted to get into police work, but just couldn't afford the late night academies. In 2000, what was it? 2006? Yeah.
2006. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that right? My mind is going right now. Sorry about that. Yeah, 2006 and 2008, I ran for U.S. Congress as a Republican here in the 12th Congressional District against Tom Lantos. Actually did pretty good the first time, but not too much the second time. I got over 126,000 votes. So how did I get into this stuff?
Yeah.
In about 2006, I started really getting interested in the YouTube videos about Nibiru is here. Nibiru is here, and they were giving sky coordinates for Google Sky Earth and for Worldwide Telescope, and I think there's 2 or 3 other free things, and I was actually looking these things right up on the internet, and everywhere it said to look for, NASA or someone else had blanked out what the whole image looked like. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just clearing my throat. Sorry about that, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And that don't make any sense to me. Even though I've had some trolls come to me and try to make up good excuses for it, it's still no excuse for it.
Well, I sent those coordinates, sky coordinates, into a friend of mine that's still at NASA. Can't mention his name or anything else about him. And he sent me back a DSS. This is an image of what you would physically see through a telescope. And this image is on your web page, probably in your chat room, where you have 5, almost 6 white dots orbiting around something. Okay, that really kind of set me going here. Okay, cool, because everything I mostly had read or heard about brown dwarf stars said a brown dwarf cannot be seen unless you're using infrared or microwaves.
Now, let me give you just really quick a good argument that somebody has made with me. Somebody who I've classified as a troll. Don't get me wrong, but
Sure.
they did bring up one good point, and that is even an object that you would need infrared to see, if it got close enough. Once it got close enough, like even like near where Jupiter is, I mean, we could see Jupiter because light reflects off it. So if it got close enough, we'd be able to see it, right?
Yes, and it really works for something solid that had physically come into our system. Okay, now we're stepping into a different part here. We're going to be talking about Nemesis. NASA actually imaged a lot of this stuff back in 2007, 2008, where they actually have a infrared image of our brown dwarf companion to our sun. It's called Nemesis. Nemesis has its own little system. Its system has 7 planets. Believe it or not, it does. The brown dwarf system, being a companion to our sun, orbits around our sun over a long period of time, like 26,000 years, as it makes one complete orbit around our sun. Its 7 planets, only a few of those planets actually interact with our solar system. 2 of them that I know of right now is Nibiru, is planet number 6, and Sedna is the outermost planet of Nemesis. Sedna has been actually being seen on several astronomy programs. I use astroviewer.com. And in AstroViewer, I took several of the images and I sent them to your show so the visitors and listeners can actually see what AstroViewer shows. It shows that Sedna has a massive orbit all the way around our system, and our system is down towards one corner of Sedna's orbit. And that's all explained when you go to YouTube and look for a video from about Nemesis, the evil twin to our sun. It's about a 50-minute video, and they go into it in complete detail. They talk about Nemesis, and they talk about exactly what the system would look like, which is a direct match for what I show in the stuff I have.
Fantastic. Now, I've seen the picture with the objects that you were just talking about, and that is up on the website, so everyone could go. If you're in the chat and listen page, where it's probably where you are, if you're listening, then scroll down, you'll see a picture slider, and those pictures are in that slider for you to check out. Now, how do we know what that is, what that's a picture of? How do we know?
Okay. All you see in those pictures is the orbit of Sedna. Sedna has a tremendous orbit, and it's virtually round. The only thing that will give it a round orbit is if it's orbiting around something. So something is missing right in the middle of that orbit. Another group made created a PowerPoint slide set of 8 slides a while back in 2009. Can't mention their name, from leaked information from NASA. And in those slides, they show the 6 planets which orbits around Nemesis, the brown dwarf. And 1 through 8 takes you from 2009 till December 21st of 2012. As of 2012, Nibiru, which was planet number 6, was only about 20 AUs. That's astronomic units, which is like from the Earth to the Sun, 93 million miles for 1 AU. And it said in there, it projected that Nibiru would be that far away as of December 21st, 2012. So if you take that image right there, put that within, I'm going to try and have that done pretty soon, and it will clearly show all 7 planets in this one system.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm looking at the pictures now as they slide through, and so these graphs, who made these graphs with the orbits and such?
Those were made by another group, which I can't get into,
okay,
because stuff was created by them.
That's fine, but you know who created them, though.
Yes, I do.
Okay, good.
And they clearly show all the planets orbiting 1 through 8. You can clearly see all 6 planets as they slowly orbit around Nemesis. Now, for them to know that as well as they could to create what they had, they got fantastic information from NASA. And the person at NASA doesn't want anyone to know who that person is. So our governments around the planet have known about this since at least 1954. President Eisenhower made a big mistake back then. He personally invited the Bishop of Los Angeles, Francis M. McIntyre, to be his spiritual advisor at a very secret meeting down in what used to be called Muroc Airfield. It's now called Edwards Air Force Base. That is where Eisenhower met with a hand-picked Western team of scientists. They met with 3 alien races they had set down. Supposedly, one was the Greys, the second was a reptilian-looking race, the third was an interdimensional race called the Etherians. Now, how do I know this? After the 2-day meeting, everyone had to sign sworn statements they would never talk about anything. The bishop went straight back to Rome and told Pope Pius XII everything he saw and heard. And there was another person there. He created a really nice letter right after he got back home. He was there with the Hearst newspaper group. I don't know if you have that letter on your stuff for the chat room. If not, they can go directly to my webpage called starshipsaroundthesun.com, and they will see that webpage right there on my front page.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, this one person, he said he was there and he saw this and he saw that. And yes, that's where the interdimensional race comes in. And he mentions a very important thing. During his time there watching all this stuff, he said he saw a solid object completely dematerialize before all of their eyes. Now, anyone who's ever done a check on that term from 1954 would clearly see that that term was never used until Star Trek came out in 1965. It was never used in any book, any TV show, nothing. So that puts some pretty good things in that one person's background there. Okay. Pope Pius XII put an archbishop over Bishop McIntyre, and they had a joint alliance between the United States and the Western countries to hold secret meetings here on Earth. They were also held in the Vatican Gardens. Some part during that meeting, the aliens warned President Eisenhower about upcoming natural disasters that will be caused because of a rogue planet and its brown dwarf star as they came into our system. They offered their help and support, all of which Eisenhower turned down flat and told them to get out. He told them basically that if they ever landed here again, we'd shoot them from the skies. So the aliens left, and something must have happened between their leaving and early 1955. Eisenhower went to Holloman Air Force Base in early 1955. His plane landed Air Force One. As it landed, it came to the end at the runway, and he ordered everything to be shut down. All of the radars, telephones, all communications, the gates would be shut. You see, the early version of the Doppler radar that we use now with our weather stuff was being just tested back in Roswell, New Mexico, at the base right there. The Doppler radar took out three of their ships, causing them to crash. One of the craft, 2 survivors were found in it. One was shot dead trying to escape. The other one was brought in for interrogation, I guess you might say, and they allowed him to play with they allowed it to play with one of the less damaged ships, and in a sense, he phoned home. The 3 large ships were seen by our astronomers approaching in somewhere around late 1953. That's where everything was set up for 54. Eisenhower went to Holloman in early 55. After everything was shut down, 2 flying saucers appeared. One stayed hovering above Air Force One. The other one landed right in front of Air Force One. And Eisenhower was seen leaving Air Force One and getting into the craft. Supposedly, I'm going to keep using that word because I personally don't know, but I know what has been leaked. Supposedly, he met directly with the Anunnaki. They were being called the Nordic-looking ones back then. How do I know that?
Yeah, how do you know?
Well, there's been so much stuff that's been leaked over the years. And anyway, Eisenhower met with the Anunnaki, tried to make a technical treaty with them, but they refused because they told him supposedly that the Anunnaki almost wiped out the human race back in our ancient history, and they didn't want to do it again. Plus, if we ever got into a fight with nuclear weapons here, we could possibly destroy everything on Earth and possibly damage their bases on their moon. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I do believe that there are bases not only on the moon but on Mars too, and I think I've seen some pretty credible stuff.
And that's where if anyone has read The Lost Book of Enki by Zecharia Sitchin, they would know that. They would know that yes, there was something done up on the moon, and they would also know that the Anunnaki had made bases on Mars as a go-between with the gold, the copper, the brass, the silver, but the gold was the most important thing.
You know, some people think that Zecharia Sitchin was playing for both sides, I guess you could say.
Okay, and my friends warned me about that when they first heard I was going to be doing research on it. They told me very clearly, do not read any of Zecharia Sitchin's books, and do not read Velikovsky's stuff. It's all BS. Hopefully I can say that here on your radio show.
Oh, yeah, BS is just fine. Now, were they Anunnaki, or were the Anunnaki reptilians? And I'm kind of jumping here, I'm sorry, but...
I honestly don't know. I've found no descriptions of what the Nordics were supposed to have been, other than they were tall, light-skinned, and they looked basically people that might come from Norway or Sweden, stuff like that. They're about 7 foot tall, give or take. That's the only description I've ever heard about them. Okay, I've heard several different things being addressed as the Anunnaki as being shapeshifters. Who knows? Okay, now, in early 2000s, the Vatican sent out a high-ranking Jesuit priest to go and talk to Christopher Barbato, an Italian reporter. They talked, and the high-ranking priest told Barbato everything that the Vatican has known since '54. And they were just getting worried because the governments around our planet were not saying anything about this stuff. And they were hoping that Barbato would, since he was writing stuff for UFO magazines, maybe he could get the information out in that way, and it would force the governments to come public with this stuff. Barbato's works were printed only in Europe and Italy, never here in the United States. There is a mass disinformation program between the United States and Canada. So we're not hearing any of this stuff. Barbato talked to his friend Lucas Scantamburlo, another Italian reporter, and told him everything that he could. He didn't want to tell him everything. Lucas Scantamburlo did some reporting and checked out everything, and then he did his own articles. Project Camelot, which some of your listeners probably know about or don't know about.
Sure.
They have YouTube videos up under that name, and they went to Lucas Scantamburlo, and he actually did a 2-hour video for them called The Return of Planet X. You can find that on YouTube, and if you click down after it says Show More, you'll see his webpage on Project Camelot. Click on that, and you can look. You can see. Here's the links for the 2 videos, and here's also the links for the text transcripts for video 1 and video 2, and several other things that he was in on. Lucas Scantamburlo did a really good job. I don't think, in my opinion, that the Project Camelot, the 2 reporters that were interviewing him, did a good enough job. They found out information, but they didn't press that information. They kind of BS'd it. And I was a little bit irritated when they didn't get as much information. They said in there that thing directly from him, and he saw what happened.
Right, he had to jump out of the spacecraft?
Off the telephone pole.
Oh, okay.
Okay. See, President Eisenhower, he wanted to go public with all of this information in '54. But his hands were tied by Majestic 12. And that's mostly out of other people I've got research from, and from the leaks from the Vatican. So Eisenhower wanted to go public. So once he met with the Anunnaki and he found out that they still claimed the moon as theirs, he was so angered that supposedly, again, when he got back to the White House, he ordered that anything about aliens, flying saucers, were to never be mentioned in the White House ever again. And he handed the entire alien UFO stuff over to MJ-12. Now, again, supposedly, later on during his term, he was supposedly overheard regretting ever doing so, because he didn't think MJ-12 was doing it the way he would have done. Now, when Eisenhower left office, he actually did a TV special, and he talks to the public. And in that TV special, he is hinting very strongly that the public never trust the big businesses and the military because of their connections with the MJ-12, or what other people call the other government, the outside government.
The secret government. Yeah.
The secret government. Now, again, there were very strong rumors that were put into writing. I've seen them on I don't know how many different web pages, that supposedly President Eisenhower spoke privately with incoming President Kennedy and told him too much stuff. Supposedly, early in Kennedy's presidency, he went directly to a lot of the military bases and refused to talk to the officers, but talked to the enlisted men about what was going on there. Now, the BBC did an article about 10 years ago, give or take, about was President Kennedy actually killed because of his knowledge about some of the alien stuff.
I think it was a combination of things, but
yeah. And they actually had 2 documents that they got from our government basically saying, I want this stuff on my desk before I get back from Dallas. And the dates were 10 days before he was assassinated.
You know,
now, do I know this personally? No, I do not. Am I speculating? Yes, I am.
Well, yeah, and there's always going to be some speculation. But, you know, what strikes me kind of crazy is that it's my understanding he was warned that he should take a different route. And you know, it pretty much was tipped off that something could happen. He didn't care. He did it anyways.
Yes. I've talked to a lot of people that say virtually the same thing. Okay, how did all this stuff start out? Well, after I did my research was basically what happened here on Earth 3,600 years ago. Okay, you had the Exodus, supposedly, but you also had the ancient volcano of Thera, which is now called Santorini, erupt back then, virtually wiping out the entire island. Okay, so you've got that, you've got this. Went to China. Mozi, M-O-Z-I, in his book 5. You can go on to Google and you can search Mozi book 5, and it'll take you directly to his ancient writings, which have all been checked, they've all been transcribed into English or whatever language you need. And in his book 5, about halfway down, he talks about 3 gods came to China. And this was a time well before the first emperor. See, the first emperor, he tried to destroy all of the ancient documents before him and said he's the first emperor.
And that's kind of strange too, because it seems like every country or what have you, there was some evil ruler who wanted to destroy all the books.
Exactly, and he came very close to doing so. And Mozi's works were found, they were translated, and they're up on the internet. So book 5, about halfway down, tells about 3 gods who came to ancient China, and they align themselves with one of the warlords. And to punish the other warlords, they made sand fall from the sky for almost 10 days. Forests were set on fire. They had a massive time of heat and cold. And all this stuff was done in China. And everyone just bowed down to that one warlord. Now, going even further back in Chinese ancient history, and you can check all this stuff on Google, there was an emperor, Yahoo, Y-A-H-O-U.
Oh, yeah, Yahoo. When I saw that, I says, well, that's kind of strange, and now we have Yahoo. Oh, my God.
Yes, and this emperor talks about how a thing showed up in the sky, and the oceans topped the high Chinese mountains. And for 13 years, all the people that survived in China were ordered to drain the salt water from the high mountain valleys all the way down to the rivers and out to the oceans. It took them 13 years. And then he sent 4 teams. They had to look for where was north, south, east, or west. And they had to make a brand new calendar because the days had shortened. So there's plenty of ancient records that are still around. Okay, I found out all that stuff, and then I went and read Lost Book of Enki and Velikovsky's stuff, and it nailed it. Nailed it down, but good. Nibiru supposedly was going through our system for uncounted centuries until it accidentally got too close to a planet that was in the orbit where the asteroid belt is now.
I don't know
used
if
to be
it was
called
an accident.
Tiamat. And one of Nibiru's moons... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I was like, well, I don't know if it was an accident or not, but...
Well, according to the Lost Book of Enki, and because my research, I just jumped right in line with Zecharia Sitchin. Lost Book of Enki tells it very clearly that during one of these very, very, very rare occurrences, the two planets got too close to each other, and one of Nibiru's moons smashed into Tiamat, breaking it into basically about two pieces. Small amount became the asteroid belt. The larger amount was kicked into a lower orbit, which is where the Earth is right now. One of Tiamat's moons followed what was left of Tiamat and became our moon right now. That is why the Anunnaki claim it, because they know how it happened and when. Okay, so they came here to Earth basically about 450,000 years ago. They were looking for gold to fix their atmosphere because it does a certain thing to the atmosphere. So they came here, they found it, but the Anunnaki did not like working with their hands here on Earth to dig up all the stuff. So they decided to create a worker race, not a slave race. Very clear, Lost Book of Enki says, under Anunnaki law, slaves were forbidden.
So is that where this particular information comes from? From the book?
Yes.
Okay.
The book of Enoch, tablets 9 and 10 go into great detail about how they were here on Earth, and because of a very rare alignment in our system of the 7, from the Earth out to Pluto, it altered forever Nibiru's flight path through our system, bringing it closer to Mars, also bringing it closer to the Earth the same way. The first time it went through, it caused a tremendous amount of damage. The second time it came, it was going to be coming through. The Anunnaki knew, because of their scientific stuff and because of all the stuff they put down in the cold white lands, which we now call Antarctica and South Africa, they knew that the second time around was going to cause great damage here on Earth. So the leaders, Enki, Enlil, Anu, which is the king of Nibiru, and their half-sister, which I can never pronounce her name correctly. They knew exactly what was going to happen. And they didn't want the Iligi, I-G-I-G-I, the ones that came down from Mars to Earth in the Lost Book of Enoch. They took the 200 females and kept them as wives. And the Nephilim were their children, the hybrids. Those were also what, in our ancient history, were called the gods.
The gods, yeah.
Roman and Greek mythology, they knew the Nephilim. It's also in the Bible about these giants that came down to Earth and grabbed 200 females and had kids with them, and the giants were born from them. That's the Nephilim. the gods. Okay.
See, and before you go on, let me just say that I believe that there is a big G, and I call that God, the Creator, creation is, I think, the universe, and it's so big we can't comprehend it, we can't see it all. But what I'd like to know is, you know, now the Anunnaki, how did they get created? And I want to dig back and get all the answers. I mean, where did it all start? I kind of don't believe there was just this big bang and here we were.
That is a very slippery slope for anyone who tries to do research on any of this stuff. Any of it. And I'm going to be getting into it pretty good here pretty soon. Are you going to be taking a break now? Or are you going to...
yeah, as a matter of fact, we are arted. That's what we are. Nobody controls us. That's why we can talk about things that we're talking about tonight with my guest, Robert. And, Robert, we are back. And so many places to go tonight. Where do we go next?
Okay. If your listeners want to look at some of the stuff I have, these are all NASA, SOHO, stereo ahead, stereo behind, satellite camera images, and they tell, for those who see what they want to see, part of the picture. They can go to starshipsaroundthesun.com, and they can click on the photo section, and you have at least 20 pictures right there out of over 3,000 images I currently have. Okay, don't want to get you too tied up here for just ancient history, but the Anunnaki are clearly in our ancient history. The Anunnaki, people did many wall covering type things, nicely carved out to show them. You probably have seen them every once in a while on Ancient Aliens, some of the other shows. There's one image, which I didn't send to you, and I'm sorry I didn't, of an Anunnaki carved onto this one piece, and he's pointing towards something up in the right-hand corner. But right on his chest is a beautiful cross, and it's a special-looking cross. And I had to research the heck out of that, and it's called Cain's Mark. That's what it's called. It's called a cross within a circle, and it has a certain shape and everything to it.
Oh,
all right. That is somehow linked to the Vatican. Back in the 1100s, the Vatican told the people that became the Templars and the Hospitallers to use this certain image on their shields and on their clothes. So they went to Jerusalem, they went digging around, and about 8 years later they came racing back to Europe, and they were extremely wealthy. They found something there in Jerusalem, call it the chalice, the any of the different things you might think of from religious type. My mind's going blank on a couple of names right here. The Grail, the Holy Grail, and some other stuff. They became exceptionally wealthy, and their knights went around, did this, did that, did that. They went down to Malta, which is my wife's parents' place of birth. We just recently went there early June. That's why that cross, Maltese cross, was stuck in my head. So when I saw this wall carving, I said, whoa, that just like I know what that is. So I went and researched it down, and the Knights Templar and Hospitallers spread that all around in Europe there, the different groups. And as it turned out, from the Hospitallers, the Templars and the Hospitallers, other groups were formed. The Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons. And then it takes you off into a tear completely different, but talks more about what that, in my opinion, the Grail is a bloodline. And that's what so many shows have been talking about one way or the other. Is it a bloodline, or is it actually the Holy Grail? Okay. My opinion, it's a bloodline. It's the Anunnaki bloodline.
Would that be, you think that would go right with queens and presidents and all that?
Yes, it would. Also with Oak Island. Because all the Templars were not killed. Some of the shows say, they were all killed, don't worry about it. No, 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 no. Some of the Templars went to other countries which were against the Vatican, and they became part of their knights. Or they went to Scotland and actually helped the Scots get their first freedom with William Sinclair at that one church, St. Clair's Church over there in England. Okay, so I know that that's there because I've had to research the holy heck out of it. So all this stuff goes down to basically around 1558 to 1600 BCE. What happened then? Well, you had the Exodus. The Bible's never pinned down a date. I have. The Colburn has ancient manuscripts which were hidden up until the 1100s AD. And in there, they have other accounts from an Egyptian scribe, a highly trained Egyptian scribe called Ipuwer, I-P-U-W-E-R. And in there, he tells exactly what happens during the exodus of the slaves and evildoers. Because during that time, the destroyer was in their skies for almost 10 days. The ancient Egyptians called the destroyer and also the doom ship, otherwise Nibiru. It rained fire from the sky, it did this, it did that, it caused these plagues to happen, and oh, by the way, rocks falling from the sky caused the destruction of the palace of the Pharaoh and killed his firstborn.
So are you then saying that Nibiru and Planet X are two different entities? Because if you are, no. Oh, because I got to thinking maybe Nibiru was like letters on the side of some giant mothership.
No. And that has been part of the misrepresentation and misunderstanding all this. Nibiru is the planet of the crossing. Now, if you put the nemesis brown dwarf interacting with our system, with Nibiru coming through between Mars and Jupiter, it makes sense. But being called the planet of the crossing.
Right.
It crosses over into our system and then leaves.
Right. But at the same time now, if you think back, thousands of years ago, even let's say 3,600 years ago, people, maybe something the size like of a Star Wars Death Star, if you will, something like that. Maybe to them, it might have looked like a planet. So,
And that's entirely possible. I just know that they called it the Destroyer. And they had been calling it the Destroyer for thousands of years before 1558 BC.
Well, that's what's important, the fact that it's called the Destroyer. I'm sure it's got its name for a reason.
Yes. And all this stuff is happening, but it's nowhere in Egyptian history. And why is that? Because the Hyksos were in charge of Upper Egypt from the 12th Egyptian dynasty to the end of the 17th Egyptian dynasty. They were kicked out somewhere between 1558 and 1600 BCE, and the first Egyptian pharaoh to reunite Upper and Lower Egypt was Akhmos I. And this is a name that's not even Egyptian. It's almost Hebrew. Akhmos, or Akhmosis. which is getting some other stuff put in here too. I have to try and stay away from all the other stuff just to see if I can tell the story here. Okay, during the time of all this major stuff that's happening, the slaves and evildoers and a huge amount of Egyptians took off out of what's called Avaris, which was their the Hyksos capital. And for 7 days they walked up towards the Mediterranean, and they were stopped at a saltwater marsh. It was too deep to go through, and they knew Pharaoh was coming after them. And Pharaoh did go after them. Pharaoh grabbed all of his troops and took off, went from town to town. Each town had been looted. All the records were smashed. Granaries were looted. Everything was just complete turmoil. So he followed. These slaves and evildoers were coming back. Okay, this is an Egyptian version, so they don't mention anyone's names. They caught up with them. Oh, let me back up here a second. They were all led by a priest prince from the inner courtyard of Pharaoh, and that's very clear in his accounts. So Pharaoh caught up with them. Now during this time, there's been heavy tectonic activity. The ground has been dropping, it's been shaking really heavily, all this stuff, fire coming out of the ground, and oh, by the way, ash is falling all over Egypt. Ash from a volcano. Now, how many volcanoes are down here in Egypt or anywhere near Egypt? So that's clear in the account. So he catches up with them, and then he sees them down here, and they're all fighting amongst themselves, and for some reason this thing in the sky is causing a sound that is being described as 10,000 trumpets all yelling at the same time. And they have to listen to this, and it's almost deafening to them. Then Pharaoh goes in and attacks them. The priest prince from the inner courtyard of Pharaoh leads him across the saltwater marsh because the ground beneath it had risen up, leaving nothing but mud. So they're racing across, and there's a tail end which stands and fights Pharaoh. So they're fighting in this saltwater marsh, and everything just goes nuts. Then a tremendous roar is heard in the skies. A tremendous roar they had never heard before. And then the water rushes out into the Mediterranean. That tells you a tsunami is coming. If anyone remembers 2004, when the big tsunami hit most of Sumatra and stuff, that's exactly what happened. So this tremendous roar stops them. Now, Ipur doesn't say how long they were stopped, when did they get back going, or what. All he says, here's this gigantic tsunami coming in and just washes Pharaoh and these hind people that were fighting, just washes them all away and floods most of Egypt. That's how big this tsunami was. Now, what would cause a tsunami back then? The eruption of Thera up in the Greek islands. Its tsunami just washed right over Crete and almost destroyed everything that was there and pushed the palace of Knossos almost, I guess, 20 or 30 feet from its foundations. Okay? That's the only thing that marks that date in time, between 1558 and 1600 BC. Go on Google, do a search on it. Almost everyone says that same time period. The remnants of the chariots were found at the bottom of the Red Sea about 20 years ago, and they date to the end of the 17th Egyptian dynasty. Right then and there. Ahmose I was pharaoh in 1550 BCE. There's another thing your listeners can go dig up. It's called the Tempest Stele, S-T-E-L-E, of Akhmos I. Now, this stela, Akhmos had ordered being built to commemorate everything he had to rebuild in Egypt. So many things were destroyed or undermined, and it's all in hieroglyphics. And oh, by the way, the pyramids had collapsed. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, the pyramids had collapsed. Anyone that looks at the 3 pyramids down there, they all should be wondering why the outside stuff is not there, and only one of them has stuff way up there at the very top.
Well, I'll tell you another question I got about those pyramids is, why are there pyramids, see, what appear to be pyramids on Mars as well, that would almost match what we've got here on Earth, right?
An excellent question. If supposedly they are pyramids. And if they are, and NASA hasn't been telling us, just like that face that was seen on Mars, and they went back years later and they took another picture. Nah, don't worry, that it was just a fate. It was just a funny trick of light on that one day. But there is a big base up there, and I know it's there. I've seen the pictures of it. I've read remote viewer Dr. Courtney Brown's account of it.
Oh, yeah, we just had him on, I think a week ago.
He is fantastic, and I'll be getting back to him in a little bit. Anyway, so there, Nibiru was here between 1658 and 1600 BCE. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now we race to the future. Eisenhower met with them in 54, 55. Supposedly all the secret meetings are still being held. The Vatican knew everything about it. All the popes knew it after Pope Pius XII. The next pope right after Pope Pius XII was talked about that he was actually dealing with the aliens even then, but he wanted to keep his arms away from them, keep them separate. So the Secret Service, being part of the Vatican, their own version, kept him away from a certain area, and it knows exactly where to look, and it finds it. It finds a heat signature which is between 4 to 8 times the size of the Earth. And someone at NASA said, hey, let's do a news conference real quick. We have to talk to those upper people. So they do a news conference, and they tell several different major papers, and boom, it's right there. Several days later, NASA says, no, that wasn't what happened. Don't worry about it, guys. Sorry, we made a mistake here. We didn't see anything out there. So it was all retracted.
It always is, right?
Yes, but in private scientist type stuff, here's this little part here saying we've sent these 2 probes out, and they're being diverted to look for this, and it's actually showing Nibiru and its dwarf star, and it's showing all this different stuff, and it was shown in different things that were just leaked over the years. Okay, NASA put up several different groups to work on this stuff. One of the famous scientists was Robert S. Harrington from the Naval Institute, and he led his own group. I don't have the names of all the people that were in his group, but I have some possibilities. And Robert S. Harrington had a falling out with NASA. It's very clear. And he was going to go public with everything he knew. He knew that Nibiru had its own orbit, not an elliptical orbit, which everyone else has been hearing around stuff. And he knew that the ecliptic angle of Nibiru coming through our system was between 30 and 40 degrees, or something around there. So he knew all that from his own research, stuff NASA was giving him. So just before he was getting ready to do his news conference I think it was 1992, he died suddenly from a very rare form of cancer that no one ever heard he knew about. Just like the movie 2012, when the dude from the Louvre was killed accidentally or deliberately before he was going to hold his own news conference. See, Hollywood has been dropping hints for a long time now. A very long time. See if maybe some of your listeners know about that. So he's killed, but in the mid-90s, Area 51 designs and builds with alien help. This was all on that transcript from Lucas Scantamburlo with the Project Camelot videos. They built a very advanced space probe. This space probe was taken into orbit by the Aurora craft. From Earth, it went straight out past Pluto, met up with Nibiru, orbited it, and videotaped it. What it did other than that, I have no idea. I just have the account that was told by Lucas Scantamburlo. Eventually, the craft returned to Earth very fast. It makes NASA and its slow-moving stuff look like something I cannot say on your show.
Now, let's say this Planet X it's supposed to come in between the Earth and the Sun, correct?
No. That's another misunderstanding.
Well, do tell.
Nibiru never comes... Okay, the Nibiru orbits through our system clockwise, just like Sedna does. Everything in our system except for Pluto orbits counterclockwise. So Nibiru comes in right between where the asteroid belt is. Never comes any closer to the Earth than the asteroid belt. But according to the Lost Book of Enki, it has a very intense gravitational pull and a very intense magnetic field that it sends out.
A pull and a push, I'm sure.
Yes. So Nibiru, since it comes through at an angle, it goes down below our sun and comes up from below, and then goes back out about the same space between the asteroid belt. So what we would see is just exactly what is being told in Tablet 9 and 10 in the Lost Book of Enki. The Anunnaki knew that Nibiru was going to be coming up from below our system, and they were watching for it because they knew what it would do, or they had a good enough idea of what it would do. And as Nibiru was starting to be seen as a red star or a reddish-looking planet in the southern regions of the Earth, they knew that the higher Anunnaki, not the IGIs that had come here and did all their damage, but they were all going to go up to their spacecraft and get off the Earth. See, Enlil knew exactly what would happen, but he thought he had a good idea here to not only erase the humans, and he had a racial hatred against the humans, even though he married one and had sex with several, just as Enki and a whole bunch of the other Anunnaki did. He had a racial hatred against us. Very clear from the Lost Book of Enki.
Nice.
So he wanted nothing to be told to the humans or anyone else, and he made Enki, their half-sister, swear to it. Enki went beyond his bounds and went to what's now called Noah. And that's the other account I sent to you. That's also found in the Kolbrin, telling how Noah was told through a reed a wall during it, and he thought it was a dream, supposedly, and told him exactly what to do and where to build the ship. Now, just like in the movie 2012, he knew that the ship had to be built way up in the mountains because the water would come up to them. And all the dimensions are exactly as everyone has found in the Bible. Cubit by cubit. No ifs, ands, or buts. But he details very clearly how the ark would be built. It has 3 decks. The heavier animals were on the lower deck. Birds and bird fowl type were on the second deck. And each deck was divided between, so, making it like 6 decks right there. The third deck had the king, his personal family, and it just goes right down the line telling he had this person, that person, all the way. Each craft that they could do, making beer, making this, making that, dancing, God knows what. They grabbed one person that was a specialist in all of this, and they were to be on board the ship. They also allowed to have the last, I think it was 6 strangers that were anywhere near the ark before they closed the doors. The next day, the destroyer, just as in later in time during the Exodus, the destroyer appeared in the skies and everything shifted. A geological pull shift.
So if it's at the asteroid belt, if it gets that far, are you saying that it's big enough where you won't be able to mistake it in the sky still?
You'll be able to see it. Now, why hasn't it done damage every single time it's come through? It's a fluke. It has its own orbital speed as it goes through, and one orbit in the Lost Book of Enki is called 1 Shar. With us, it's 3,600, between 450 to 600 years. As it swings through, it has a slow enough orbit. Our orbits are fast as we go around counterclockwise around our sun. So just like Marshall Masters, he's put out several videos. If your listeners have ever gone to his site on YouTube, special videos. Okay, here's the hot shots. Okay, if we are far enough away from Nibiru when it swings through, we might hardly get any damage. But if in our orbit, if we're nearer to Nibiru, as it's up there by Mars, we're going to get the bleep kicked out of us.
Well, I think we would anyways, because it would probably pull a lot of crap out of that asteroid belt.
It probably does. It probably has done some damage. The account back in back during the Exodus was fairly bad as it was. All of ancient Egypt was basically flooded. The Aztecs, they ran for the high hills, and only the ones that were up in the high mountains survived. Who knows what it did around the rest of the planet? Solon, ancient Solon, the Greek philosopher, he went and talked to the ancient Egyptian priests, and they told him that this stuff had happened many times in their ancient history, but each time it wipes out most of the humans, and they're all put back to 0 because they have to learn how to read and write again. And only the ancient Egyptians had enough knowledge and ways of keeping that knowledge that they stayed above everyone else. So, okay, yeah, all this stuff's been happening. And the accounts from Ippur and from the Kolbrin are very clear what has happened. Now we jump to about 1983, somewhere just past that, about 87. They're building the deep underground military bases, the D.U.M.Bs, over in Norway. And one of the chief engineers, and I sent you the stuff from this, and anyone else can find it, or they can contact me, and I'll send it to them myself. They're building these giant D.U.M.Bs underground, and they have enough D.U.M.Bs to have all of the elite Norwegian people safe, and they built them all because Nibiru was coming. Very clear. That's also why, has anyone ever heard of the Doomsday Seed Vault? 60 Minutes did a 60 Minutes did a nice thing on it years ago up there in Smalvard, Norway. Every seed for every plant, food and not, is being stored there in a massive seed vault.
It's my understanding that there's actually two of them, one on each side of the globe.
There are more than that. I'm sorry, Michael.
Oh, you're probably right.
Okay.
If I know of two, there's probably 15.
and that's because after Eisenhower talked to the Anunnaki, I'm quite sure he went digging through ancient history and he found all these accounts. Okay? So they knew that when Nibiru was in the sky, everything that grew on vine, orchards, or anything was burnt to a crisp. And according to Ippewer, very clearly, at the end of his account, it's in the Kolbrin only, he talks about he wished that the Egyptians had been nicer to the, he calls them Hebrews, K-E-B-R-E-W-S. Okay? So it was the Hebrews that were leaving, and it was the Exodus. And he also says that after the destroyer left, a global shift had happened because all of their growing seasons were thrown out the window.
That's happening now, as a matter of fact.
Well, not really, but we're getting close.
Yeah.
I mean, he says it was immediate. Okay? He says the stars moved to new positions in the sky. The sun and the moon set and rose in new positions that they'd never done that before. And that's exactly what Solon had told, had found out from the ancient Egyptian priests, that had happened several times. The Chinese mentioned that in the Emperor Yahoo account.
No.
And Mosai of China in Book 5 also mentions it again. So, yes, we have these DUMBs all around the planet.
Oh, we do. But let me ask you this quickly. How do we know that they were, I mean, obviously they were describing what they were seeing. So that's a given. It happened. But how do we know that they weren't just, it happened then and it won't happen again?
They don't. Except if you go to any astronomical program and you look down at the rotation of our planets, the Earth is rotating counterclockwise towards where Nibiru will be swinging up. Now, yes, Nibiru doesn't come any closer than between Mars and Jupiter, but there will be extreme gravitational and magnetic effects because of it. That's why they built all these things deep underground, so the elite, just like in the movie 2012, with their arcs, they'll all run underground. And they supposedly will survive down there for several months. And supposedly the idea is that if there are any survivors, they will start rioting amongst themselves, and they'll kill almost all of themselves amongst that during that. And any survivors, once they come up, will be put into FEMA camps. Now, how many of your listeners have known before 2013 about all the massive amounts of ammunition that every agency of the U.S. government was buying up?
Now, my listeners are well aware of it, but unfortunately there's a lot who don't listen to shows like this, and they have no clue. They think it's just a conspiracy theory, but it's very real.
I followed it as much as I could. There were huge trains of automobile carrying cars that were all made up to be prison cars, and they were being kept silent, very quiet about it. But certain people were leaking information about it. A person that used to go onto YouTube, is called Just Call Me Kit. No one's heard anything from her since 2012. She was on another radio show, which I don't know if you want me to mention it or not.
Oh, go right ahead.
She was on Orion Talk Radio back in 2012, and I have a copy of the show. See, my wife and I have really been researching this for a long time. And she was talking about all the contracts that the U.S. government was putting out to quietly and quickly pull everything away from each of the 3 coastlines we have, and that the U.S. government was building 4 enormous food stations right in the middle of our country. And I forgot the states. It's 4 states, and the United States was broken down into A, B, C, and D. And each one of these food things would eventually put some supplies out to those states that were mentioned.
Probably Colorado was one of them.
Probably. And after that show, no one's heard from her since. Do I know anything happened to her? No. She might just be staying underground and keeping her mouth quiet. On YouTube, she only made 3 videos. And they're still there. She's never pulled them. Her account hasn't been pulled. Okay, let's go to the remote viewing type people, like Dr. Courtney Brown.
Yeah.
He came out with a remote viewing study between 2008 and 2013. Now, he will very quickly kick me in the butt for not mentioning that there are a tremendous amount of time miles right up to the mountains of Kilimanjaro, if I remember correctly.
Well, I know South Carolina used to be under the water because it's all sand.
But he also did mention that Washington, D.C. had been heavily destroyed, and they were seeing, or the people in these studies were writing down that all there was shambles of homes for people to try and put together to live in after all this stuff had happened. Okay. All of the predictions and prophecies told by almost everyone for almost over 2,000 years all died as of December 21st, 2012. The Aztec calendar, nothing happened this time. All the predictions and oh God, I don't know how many of those I've gone through and have read about massive water waves coming in doing this and that. It's all stopped. It all fell flat. Dr. Courtney Brown's study ended as of June 1st of 2013, when all of this stuff should have happened. But it didn't happen during this timeline. I'm going to safely say that. It didn't happen during this timeline. All the scientists have been saying for years that we were going to have massive solar storms in late 2012. The sun's been very quiet.
It has,
and do you know why? The ETs have intervened. Now, how do I know that?
Yeah, how do you know that?
You see, I found out accidentally during my research. My friend said, hey, if you're going to research Nibiru, there has to be alien ships coming here. And I think these are them. And they started sending me the satellite camera images from SOHO, the Solar Observatory, stereo behind, stereo ahead, the U.S. Navy's satellite system called SECCHI, S-E-C-C-H-I. And these things had unbelievable looking things on them. What were these images that were being seen by these cameras. Now, the SOHO satellite is 4 times the distance of the Earth out in space away from the Earth. It's in a Lagrange point, and it always looks at the sun. The first images I got from there were 1998. And here's this, nothing more than a classic flying saucer was heading straight towards the cameras. And it barely missed it. And then I started seeing these other huge images. I just couldn't make them out. And they were just massive looking things. And I had a friend, my wife and I had a friend, who said he was a photo analyst. And he worked down here in California at Moffett Field. Well, there's nothing around Moffett Field except for NASA. He never gave me his name, and he wanted to look at some of the images. And this big image that's very clear reminded me of someone else. Over in what's now Iran, used to be the Zoroastrian religion. And several thousand years ago, they started carving this massive wall carving, and they called it the Ahura Mazda. And anyone who's ever looked at these wall carvings, it's AUH-MAZDA, Ahura Mazda. Anyone that looks at these things clearly sees outstretched birds' wings, but there's one problem. There's landing gear coming down from the image. You can see metal rods, or what looks to be metal rods with round wheels on the end. And there's a Anunnaki god standing right in front of them. And they clearly say it's an Anunnaki god. His name is Ahura Mazda. In 2005, one of the very excellent cameras on SOHO called the EIT-304. It's an ultra extreme infrared camera. It clearly caught something coming down the left-hand side of our sun. And this image was trailing what I call drive plasma, or exhaust smoke from your car. I had to research the holy heck out of these images, because people have called me this, and that on Facebook. And then when I finally got in with, I hope I can mention this other.
You listen. You're welcome to mention anything you want on this show. We never censor our guests.
Okay.
Go for it.
They're called Third Phase of the Moon. They contacted me directly and said, "Hey, how about doing a short video for us?" And I said, "No problem." So I sent them the images, and Third Phase of the Moon under Bob Evans or Robert Evans, you'll see 2 videos on YouTube, one showing these images, showing these massive things coming into our system. The other one shows these other interesting things NASA does not want you to know about. The ETs placed, and this is ETs, not us, massive space probes all around our sun. They've been there for over 7 years. My opinion is that these space probes are controlling our sun's output. You see, very few people know that our system is electrically charged. There is a wormhole, if you can call it that, that goes out from the sun to each one of the planets, and then from the planets to each one of the moons. This wormhole, it's the energy that's in our system is at a certain rate.
Now controlling
like
our
12 volts, or how many amps, God knows what. So this Nemesis system has a different electrical rate. So each time it interacts with our sun, and every time Nibiru, as it comes through, it interacts with our sun, each one of the planets, it causes just holy heck here on Earth. Because the sun controls not only earthquakes, but tectonic plates on our Earth. So all the stuff that was being told by Ippaward back in 1558 probably was because of this interaction between our sun and the brown dwarf Nibiru and our sun.
That's a pretty tall order now to be able to actually control the sun, isn't it?
If you were that advanced, I don't think so. But ever since those things had been seen around our sun, we started having problems. And now, is this the interaction between all this stuff? I don't know. Other people say yes. We've had mass animal die-offs that continue around the planet. They went all around the world. Mass animal die-offs, this and that, even things deep underwater, all the way to everything that flies and everything that crawls or walks on the planet. We've had a higher than normal volcanic activity rate going on around the planet. We've had different volcanoes. Here in the United States, the Long Valley caldera down near Los Angeles has been really ticking up with the tremors lately. Tremors around
Yellowstone?
No, my mind's going blank right now.
Let's just say some big volcanoes.
The big park up in Montana. What's that big park?
Oh, yeah, Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. Yellowstone's on top of a massive caldera, which has exploded at least 3 times over the last 2-point-something billion years. It's ticking and has been ticking for a long time. The ground has actually been rising in part of Yellowstone, and the roads, the regular road you drive on, has actually been almost melted because of the underground heat. Different other volcanoes around the Earth, up in Iceland, over in the Kamchatka Peninsula over there in Russia. So we have the highest volcanic rate right now. Either they're rumbling or they've already erupted.
Yeah.
Tectonic plate problems. That's all part of the earthquake type stuff.
Let's hold off there on tectonic plates. We'll come back and we'll pick back up there. We do need to take a break.
Yes.
At least one more here. And I want to give a shout out to High Point Radio, who has notified me that this show has been going over live. They usually take it after the fact. And tonight we are being broadcast live across New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania from High Point Radio, the top of New Jersey. So hello to all of you who are listening. Now that you're hearing it live, you may just want to get addicted to us now because, Robert, we're back. We were talking the plates.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so all that stuff is slowly happening, and who knows exactly what is actually causing it. Is it this stuff happening, or is it something else happening? I'm in there with I'm sitting right there with Zachariah Sitchin on this stuff. It is Nemesis. One of the programs I have is called AstroViewer. We've gone over this before. If this one program has the information it does, then this information has been out quietly and no one else has known about it. Plus, we have not seen one major storm on the sun since 2012. This should be an extremely powerful time because this is supposed to be the sun's hot time, and it hasn't happened. And I look at each one of the dots. I've been researching, pointing directly towards these things that are all around our sun, and everything else I've researched in understanding how our system supposedly works, that points directly, in my opinion, to what the ETs are trying to have intervened and are trying to not happen.
All right. And
okay,
Robert,
so the Vatican has known about this too. There was a most recent thing from the Vatican. Our former Pope, let's see, what was his name? Pope Benedict. He got on a German radio station a while back, and he's just riling and everything about the Catholic world, and he claimed that a group of Jesuits had infiltrated the Vatican and were pursuing what he called an alien agenda.
Well, that's true. I think that's true.
Yeah, exactly. So here is Pope Benedict complaining about these Jesuits, and the only other Jesuit account came directly from Christopher Barbato, from the high-ranking Jesuit priest that came down and met with him and told him all of this stuff that's in these transcripts from the Return of Planet X with Lucas Gantamberlo. So now you have this thing. Here's this Pope. He's not the weird people off. Well, maybe he is the weird people off, but he's not the weird people off the street just saying anything and everyone just, he's a weird guy. Here's the Pope mentioning the same things I've been talking about. Okay?
Okay.
So we've got that. We've got the possibility that things are slowly ramping up. I've got friends on Facebook. Dawn Hull, D-A-W-N Hull, H-U-L-L, and her friend Denise Chavez. They've been digging up all kinds of photographs that they're taking, and this isn't my first night actually trying to do this. I've been on 2 of Third Phase of Moon shows. I got on with Dr. John Elias, down in Southern California. He's part of the Third Phase of Moon, and also he's a broadcaster.
Well, Robert, let me just say you're doing a fine job here tonight, and there's so much that obviously it's almost impossible to put it all in order and cover everything. We do have a call. We have Ira. Welcome aboard, Ira. You got a question for Robert?
Hello, gentlemen. Yeah, I've got actually 2. First off, someone in the chat room made this statement, and I kind of wanted to bring this up. The reason why the sun might be having less of a potent impact than it is right now, just recently we had the incidents where it looked like there were ships or something that were actually sucking energy off of the sun. Could that be related?
Partially, and I know what it is. In another work that I have and have been starting to share around, it's a cold dwarf. Okay? NASA knows about this, so we actually have a cold dwarf that's somewhere near our sun, and several times NASA has actually caught it draining tendrils of energy away from our sun.
Well, if I could intervene really quick, I actually seen an article from NASA, this was about 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago, where they actually admitted that they had found a brown dwarf behind our sun. And, and everybody acted, well, the skeptics acted like I was crazy, but I remember, I have the article. It's in one of my files.
I remember that article as well.
Well, the brown dwarf, that is Nibiru. The brown dwarf is Nemesis. That's the one that actually has its own system with the 7 planets. The cold dwarf is a black dwarf, and it's hardly ever seen. Several times over the years, NASA has actually seen it zip through our system or do something. And then there was several images where there were CMEs coming off the sun, and they were just washing right over it. So you could see this black thing with these clouds of gas, everything flowing right over and around it, saying, "What the heck was that?" So that's what I know.
Very interesting. I like that thought. One other, I guess, sort of maybe correlation question for you. When you were speaking about Mosai, I've read some of that stuff as well before myself, and one thing that I thought was interesting correlation wise is the timing of things. The person Mosai could equal Moses, and the 5 books could equal the first 5 books of the Bible that were supposedly written by Moses. Perhaps there's a correlation or a tie-in between the two there, as well as the Akhmos incident or idea from Egypt as well, that this one person kind of is maybe either the same person interacting with everything, or that there's like the same idea that keeps getting passed on to people as a cycle, or like your classic hero story, that he's like this classic hero that people have in their mind like an archetype. I'll go ahead and let you go. I just wanted to get those questions in. Thank you so much for all the info tonight.
All
Sure.
right. Thank you, Ira. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of exactly where I was now. So the gentleman that was just on there, that's a possibility. Everything I've been told from different people I've talked to, Enki was actually the Ahura Mazda with the Zoroastrian religion. And that's why him and his ship are actually carved onto these different things showing him. Okay. When I did the show down with Dr. Elias handed me over to Ivy West. She has a radio show over in Hawaii called something on the wind right now. Sorry, Ivy, but I was on a couple of her shows, and then she passed me off to another friend, and my mind is starting to go blank, and I'm going to get my butt kicked here somewhere.
Yeah, well, these things happen.
Lorian Fenton. She's one of the MUFON directors here in Petaluma, California. And she liked what she saw, and she had me speak at UFOCon 213 here in San Jose. So I actually, for the first time, was able to put all this stuff in front of everyone and get them to see some of this stuff. I've had a lot more research since then, so I've been on several more shows, and honored to be on your show tonight. As much as I can tell, this stuff is real. It is real. The ships that are seen flying into our system, some of these ships are actually caught as they come out of what I call warp. There's a massive flash, and zoom, here's this massive thing coming right out of this big T type thing. Some of those images are on my webpage. Now, some of the guys at MUFON said, no, you're getting this all wrong, Bob. That's actually cosmic ray splashes and cosmic ray this and cosmic ray that. And I went right back to NASA, and I went through everything they had. Not only would the images be all just inhibited by little tiny white dots, but you wouldn't even be able to see the images. And the images I have are perfectly clean. There's no cosmic ray anything. SOHO, the engineers have been working since 1998 to fix every single glitch that they had found in the images and in the camera systems. And they fixed every glitch going from 1998 to 2012. And these images are still being seen.
Yeah.
And these ships are being seen firing their main weapons at stuff.
Now that I could say I've seen that. I've seen convincing. I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't up there in the ship, so I don't know. But I have seen pretty convincing video of that, where these big ships are up there and they're shooting at each other. And I mean,
no, sorry, I don't mean to step on you there. I don't think they're shooting at each other. They might be. Maybe that's the original Star Wars idea that Reagan had, because he should have known about this stuff. But the beams coming out of them, they're hitting things that cannot be registered by our cameras. So either they have a cloaking device around them, maybe they are another ship, or maybe they're just asteroids and space stuff that should have hit the Earth by now. See, Dr. Courtney Brown and his stuff, they said we should have been hit by all these massive things. And only one thing got in close, and that was that one that exploded over Russia a while back. And too many people with looking at the images actually saw some kind of a UFO firing at it. Okay.
I've watched the video of that, and it was pretty fascinating video. But and I tried to see. I've seen where people said, "Look, there's a UFO that come in and blew it up." But I'm not saying it's not there. Just because you don't see it, don't mean it isn't there. But I haven't seen that.
Well, when you follow the dots like I have, either accidentally or intentionally, that's the ETs. They're intervening.
I wish
they don't want the advanced humans that are now here to be lost because of their own planet's work.
Then I wish those who are in communication with these ETs would tell them about Fukushima and to ask them if they could airborne that and just take it off the planet for us. That would be
well. There's a lot of people that are talking about that. We're actually going to be going into a new cycle of a higher resonance type things. People that say they have contact with aliens, and this is what led me in with Dr. Sasha Lesson and with his wife Janet Lesson. I've been on their show many times now, and that's actually been dragging out all the things with the Anunnaki. Some of their guests were just fantastic. They knew all the stuff I had no way of knowing, and it started filling in the holes here and there. And then I heard your show. One of my friends pointed me right to your show with Bob Fletcher. And his information was just fantastic. I had some stuff that he didn't know about, and he had a whole hell of a lot of stuff I didn't know about. So everything tells me that, yes, this is still going on. A military friend of mine, which I'd shown these images to a while back, can't tell you what rank or whatever, he had the images looked at, and they put them under some kind of a scope or something, and they looked at the ones that were actually firing their main weapons. And the main weapon, according to him, it went right off the scale. They couldn't tell me how much power they were actually seeing in it. There's a certain type of stuff that they do during 2012, almost 2013, he bugged out and disappeared with his wife and family. He came back here a little while ago and he said, "You still got that stuff?" I said, "Yes." "You still talking about it?" "Yes." He said very carefully, "Well, everything was put off for about a year or two, and it's still happening." That's all he would tell me. And that's basically what we're hearing from a lot of people now. They're talking about this, that Nibiru probably won't be seen, just like what Bob Fletcher mentioned probably on your show. It probably won't be here until about 2017, something like that. So there's enough people that are hearing the different stuff through the trade winds or through the grapevine that know that this stuff is still going to happen. So
now, what do we say to all the people beforehand who claimed that they had Navy intelligence and that it was coming in 2012 and it was going to come in 2003? One woman said she was in contact with the ETs, and I'm with you. I believe there's something up there. I believe that it's real. There's enough evidence to point towards this at least happened in the past. So I'm not going to just brush it off. But what does upset me are those people who've come on years ago, and they've keep giving times. Oh, it's going to be here in 2003. It's going to be here in 2006. and it never happens, and it always gets pushed off. And like I was telling you off air, I think that that's purposely done to discredit it all.
That's a good possibility. All the indications I found during my research all pointed around 2012, 2013. Now, I've been reading so many different things, I can't even tell you how much I've had to read during this time. And, watching other videos that have basically been given an answer for some stuff you just mentioned. Another person on YouTube is Captain Mike and Mithy. Mithy, it's Atlantic OBR on YouTube. I've been following his work for years now, and his stuff is pretty interesting, and he's actually touched right on a lot of stuff that I've been hearing from other parts. He also touched on some work that was done by a seer, a person that does seances and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. This person actually created several images, and it was all from interdimensional contacts. Believe it or not, interdimensional contacts. Now, I sent you those images. I think they were floating around on your chat room tonight. Those images clearly show two systems interacting. The person called a binary system. Well, a brown dwarf doesn't count as a binary. It counts only as a companion brown dwarf to our sun. And it clearly shows so many planets orbiting around. And I think I sent you 4 images. 3 of them that show the planets in different locations around as they rotate around, and 1 that shows 2 of them separately. Yeah, the separate one shows, I think, almost 7 planets, which is exactly what I'm told is in the Nemesis system. It matches up with the leaked information from 2009 showing the 6 planets part of the Nemesis system, which matches up with the DSS image black and white showing 5 planets orbiting around nothing, which also matches up with the Astro Viewer images showing Sedna orbiting around a huge orbit with our system down at the bottom, closer towards the bottom part of the orbit, just as what was seen in Nemesis with our sun. There was a TV show a while back talking about that. I'm trying to remember the exact name for it now. Hold on a second. So, I'm not making this stuff up. Other people have said this is exactly how a brown dwarf would have a much larger system than our system, because they were able to float out further and further away, but because of the orbit of the brown dwarf around our system, it keeps it out that far. And this is exactly how it would be. The images from Soho and stuff, I don't have the knowledge to even try to Photoshop those things, but they were Photoshopped. I mean, they were not Photoshopped. They're all very clear. Okay? Let's see if I can snag that up real fast. That way I'll know exactly. I can tell your people exactly which one to look for. I don't have any PhDs. Okay?
That's why I like you.
Yeah. The only thing I have is the completion of a reserve officer's training class. All of this other stuff is the road of hard knocks. I've had to go out there and physically research this stuff, go through God knows how many websites on the internet, do this, do that, accidentally jump in with this other group because it was part of this and they talked about it and I got images from them. Just one thing after the other. All of my research, see, I don't get paid for any of this. Just like you and your radio show here, I don't get paid for any of this stuff. I don't have any type of title coming towards me for doing this. I've actually lost 2 desktop computers and 15 laptop hard drives because of virus attacks that try to knock me off the air. I've had to burn everything very quickly, so I have everything all this time. These images are real, just as Robert Fletcher said during his show here. This stuff is real. So whether the people want to understand it or believe it, it's entirely up to them. Some people want to go home, get to dinner, have something to drink, go to bed. They don't want to worry about everything else.
No, they want to watch Dancing with the Stars and, get on and play Candy Crush and all that good stuff.
Exactly. But when something happens, they're the first ones to say, how come we never were told about this stuff? How come we weren't told about these massive ships coming into our system using warp drive or wormholes? And by the way, these ships are about the size of our planet.
Or some man in a robe tells them, well, don't be alarmed, they're just fallen angels.
Exactly. Or, some religion says this, some religion says that, predictions here, prophecies there. Nostradamus even talked about this stuff. And the best prophet I can think of is the one that's always laughed at. Mother Shipton. Mother Shipton had a tremendous amount of prophecies, but during her stuff, she talked about, and as we came to the end of the century, all this other stuff would happen. Now, anyone who's ever read anything about pole shifts or tectonic this, tectonic that, knew she was talking about a geographical pole shift, where plates under the oceans were pushed up and the humans were now living where ocean water used to be. But she also mentioned at one point that, and Nibiru personally with microwaves. So all of those, I have, I don't know how many images, which just shows, you can look at these images either 2 ways. One, it's just full of space garbage which suddenly blows away. Or 2, the alien races or race that has all these things has put them all there for 2 reasons. One, hey humans, take a look at us. We're here, we're all friendly. Or, humans, we're ticked off. Either knock off what you're doing, or here's what we're showing that we have to go after you. I don't know which one is what for these. Because these images, they clearly show what NASA describes as anomalies / UFOs.
And you have those pictures on your website?
No, I have only 20 of over 3,000 images on my website. I will be putting these images up on my website. I will send you some of these images. That way you can show them in your chat room to other people that want to see the stuff.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I love to put the pictures up. I like people to be able to follow what we're talking about. So thank you.
And these are all perfectly clear. There's nothing in the problem with the images except for showing the anomaly. So it's not cosmic this, it's not cosmic that. Cosmic rays only hit sometimes 1 camera but not 2. They can't hit 2 cameras. And in that one set of images, I've got 2 cameras showing the same images.
Well, they did announce not long ago that they did find that there was, I guess, another system of planets with a sun, maybe even. I don't think they've seen the sun or found the sun, but they believe it's there, just outside of our solar system. They said just beyond Pluto. And
that's where Nemesis is.
Oh, so that's our Nemesis. Now, why would they even tell us about that? I mean, aren't they afraid we're going to start trying to? I don't know. We can't zoom in.
The powers that be think we're all stupid idiots. That we haven't learned anything from what they wanted us to learn. Okay? Here's another person. Colonel Philip Corso. He had a book years ago called The Day After Roswell. He, in that book, tells of how he worked at the Pentagon with alien technology or foreign technology, and how he used the stuff which they had gotten from the wrecks outside of Roswell and placed them with different companies to have them build infrared technology, fiber optics, this and that, and this and that. And they found out that the Russians were also using some of the same technology, either directly from us or from ships that had crashed over there in Russia. So it was a big game between the Russians and us. You see, one of the craft that crashed near Roswell, these were all brought down by the early Doppler radar systems. One of the craft that they went in and they checked. See, the 3 craft we have were given to the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. And each military group did their own private investigations, and no one shared anything. The craft showed that the ETs didn't have any type of waste disposal, didn't have any food preparation or storage, and there was no controls for them to actually fly the craft. They found out later that they had this harmonic type of ring around their heads. So they were using their brains to control the ships. These ships were just like shuttlecraft from a much larger mothership. So they knew that, and that's where the movie Firefox came out years ago. Remember what was this? That was about that Russian fighter where the pilot could think to make it do anything and everything.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I didn't see the movie, but I saw clips from it.
That's where that idea came from.
Well, somebody had told me once, I forget who it was, someone who was supposed to have knowledge, and said that they control these crafts with their minds.
Yes. The Russians have been working on the same type of stuff for their fighter pilots, just like we have been doing the same thing. Okay, here's Hollywood's leaks for you. The movie Independence Day, ID4. You not only find out about the president being taken out of the loop for ever hearing about Area 51 or the alien stuff, okay? And here come the aliens and do all their nice stuff, and that one guy, he has to kick their butts and take care of it. The next movie was Deep Impact, and that was supposed to be where that asteroid was coming in, and that TV announcer accidentally stumbles into it, and it was called, there was a name for it, and she finds out accidentally that the president had been hiding money because they were building these deep underground military bases, which could only take about 2,000 people from each, and each country was building their own.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you've got Battle LA, and that's with the United States Marine Corps. They were worried about stuff coming into our system like asteroids. Well, you know, you think back to Elenin, the comet Elenin that was supposed to have come through a little while back. We started doing research on that one, and NASA wasn't doing any of the close-up images. They were leaving it all to amateur astronomers. So as Elenin got closer and closer, it started looking weirder and weirder. Then the Russians came out with an article saying that Elenin wasn't a comet at all, and it was in direct communications with a Jupiter-sized planet that was following behind it. Okay, does that give you any idea here? So we started checking into the photographs even further, and they started looking even weirder and weirder. Then the Chinese came out with an article saying that there were UFOs piggybacking on this Jupiter, on Elenin. So we just jumped right in there and enlarged those images up. And guess what? Elenin had a huge sack on its back, and that sack had all kinds of huge things in it. And the sack was actually protected by some kind of a electronic field or electrical field. And I have the images that show it. And as it was coming in closer and closer to the ecliptic of our system, everyone was saying it was supposed to explode because of the energy difference between in our system and where it was coming from. But it didn't. At some point, all the stuff that was on the back shifted to both the left flank and right flank and was clearly being picked up by astronomers down in Australia.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something else. Bob Fletcher, the guest I had on the show last week, he has some fascinating pictures on his website of these underground bases, and they're not. I wouldn't even call them underground bases. They're underground cities.
Yes.
Yeah, they're entire cities, and these things are real.
Yes, I know they are real. I've seen plenty enough. The stuff from the Norwegian person that turned politician to all the other stuff, they're real. Several years ago, a lot of the caves that were under the United States control here in the United States were all being blocked up, so people couldn't go into them. They said, well, we just have to keep you from going in there. And that's been mentioned many other times. The ammunition, the guns, the stuff that was being bought up in massive amounts that are probably still being bought up. It's all meant for the survivors. And then suddenly all the predictions fell flat right in their faces about what this is all supposed to be doing. I'm quite sure a lot of your listeners know about the Georgia Guidestones.
Oh yeah, they're not that far away from me either. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm only probably, I don't know, three hours away from them.
Well, the Georgia Guidestones talked very clearly about a massive depopulation, which fits in with everything I've been telling you and your listeners tonight.
Yeah, and you tell me how those big ass stones get put in place and nobody knows where they came from. Come on.
And in text, all around, all of them, in every known language, are put a basic 10 Commandments.
Except for Japanese, right? Isn't Japanese missing?
They're all there.
Japanese.
As far as I understand, they're all there. Every known language here on the planet. And to top it all off, it says, do not let the population go above, what is it, 500 million?
Oh, yeah, they want 3/4 the population wiped out. And, so
exactly.
It'll be the elites and whoever they decide to keep around to be their little slaves. But
and have you or your listeners heard about the chemtrails by any chance?
Good Lord, heard of them. I live in them. They're all over the place here.
I have a lab report going back to 2006, 2007 that they took samples over in Italy and in Texas, and they had them highly checked into. Have you ever heard anything called Morgellons disease?
I have, but I'm being yelled at by listeners who want to know. I guess apparently I didn't let you finish. A sack full of what on Comet Elenin?
The stuff they've been spraying up there, at least back as early as 2006, 2007, had all the stuff to create all that. And I have all the images. They're still on the website. Okay. I'll send you a copy of that. A friend of mine who was also a friend of both my wife and myself, who also said he was a remote viewer, said, and this was his idea that he saw in remote viewing, that all this stuff being sprayed around was being inhaled by everyone on the planet. And he saw that the HARP facilities interacting on certain frequencies would cause those things to interact with our bodies. And they would actually have the survivors under their control. Not my idea, not my way of thinking. This was a guy, I think he's still alive, but he was having a hard time at the end. This was the guy who saw, and he wouldn't tell me exactly what would happen or tell my wife. But that's what he said would happen. That's why all the coffins were built and buried near the FEMA camps. I mean, they ordered and paid for and had built millions upon millions of coffins that can hold 2 or 3 people, and they're all buried near the FEMA camps where they can easily be dug up to put bodies in. So they've been, the powers that be, at least here in the United States and possibly Canada, they've been thinking that something truly massive was going to happen, not only here but elsewhere. But all those ideas appear to have fallen flat in their faces as of 2013. Then we got this Ebola problem. Ebola has never come into this country before. I can't think of ever hearing about it here in this country. And we've seen plenty of nice movies. There was that nice one with Dustin Hoffman a while back called Outbreak, with Ebola up there, I guess in Oregon or Washington or Northern California.
Yeah.
So this stuff, they've known. That was one of the things I've known for a while, is that, yes, the powers that be knew that we would probably freak out, just like in War of the Worlds back in, 1938, 39? So they started a program to
desensitize?
To educate the people. And this program started off with movies, books, TV shows, other types of stuff. What was one of the big movies back in the mid-1950s?
Oh, you got
When Worlds Collide. When a weird planet comes through our solar system all by itself, and it causes all this damage on the Earth, and the humans have to build rocket ships to fly to that thing because it destroyed the Earth.
Well, I'll tell you where else I seen something like this. Smallville, which is a Superman series that used to run on TV. In the last episode, there was this big red, it looked just like a Planet X, like you see the pictures coming in. And that's when he finally got into his Superman costume and got up there and pushed it back out. But it was almost
and in the comics, Scooby-Doo, you've got Velma talking about Planet X Nibiru coming into our system pretty soon. Anyone can find that on YouTube. And it's just one of the weirdest things
I'm going to look for
that.
that.
Why are you talking about this?
I didn't know she said that. Now I got to see that.
Yeah, and then Star Trek, the brand new Star Treks, the second Star Trek movie, the Starship Enterprise actually goes to Nibiru.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, which one is this? Because I want to see that too.
That's the second movie. This is the early Star Trek when Spock and Kirk were just like ensigns or something. So I'm quite sure a lot of your listeners know about it. It's the second Star Trek.
And they actually say we're heading to Nibiru?
The Enterprise goes and sees Nibiru.
Holy Christ! Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you've had Hollywood and different stories talking about this to educate the population, because if they had sat down back then, only a handful would welcome. The other ones would all want to lynch them. Now, if they sat down, a good number of us would welcome them, with very few wanting to lynch them. And that's because of all the TV shows and all the books. Star Trek Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek, the other one with the, can't think of his name right now. So they, I'm looking at these images on Soho from NASA, and I'm calling that thing just came out of warp. Here's another one was coming directly out of warp. It's firing its main phasers. I don't know how many images I have of these things firing these massive beams at something. Okay? So I've been educated accidentally or directly because of this learning curve that they wanted us to have.
Okay, Robert, we are almost out of time. We've got about another minute to go here, so I want to give.
That, yes.
Oh wow, we got a lot more to talk about, so we're gonna have to have you back. But tell people where they could go, website wise, and thank you so much for being a guest. Like I say, we've got to do a part 2 on this.
No problem. It's an honor for me even being here to tell your listeners. They can go to my webpage, which is starshipsaroundthesun.com, and they can see some of there's at least 20 images right there they can actually see, and they can see all the other shows I've been on. I'll have this one up there real soon. I'm also on Facebook, Robert H. Evans Jr., and I stay right on top of this stuff with other people. They can go back to my history there, all the stuff I post up there talking about this or that. That's about I'm not too sure about giving out an email. I'll leave that to you as your decision.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. If they could get to your website and they want to contact you, are you on Facebook?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, then they can contact you on Facebook. And how do they do that?
Just a Facebook personal message type thing.
Okay, great. And send me some links